Everybody, Kathi Hanson here from General Pencil. Today I would like to spend just a few minutes sharing with you some fun tips and tricks that you can create using a General Sketch and Wash water-soluble graphite pencil. This is just a fun little design I did, as well as these seashells. I wanted to show you these first to show you um, the beautiful artwork you can create with the Sketch and Wash pencil. But I also wanted to show you some cool things I like to use this pencil for when I'm doing my Zentangle work. Here's a fun little design right here that you can tell part of it looks darker. I did a light value smoking the edge of it. And how I did that was I just drew and went with the pencil. In its dry state, you can leave it alone. It's erasable. Now I'll make a wider line too to show you something else. When water comes into contact with it, if you just wet the line, suddenly it's going to look like paint as opposed to pencil pigment. If you turn around and wet a larger area, you can just softly smoke the area out. If you would like the very edge to diffuse to nothing, here's a little trick. And this works on all your tiles. Wet further out first, then come into it. And see how it's just going to soften out to absolutely nothing. Now, another way you can work with the pencil is pretend this is a different piece of paper and create a paper palette. And then you can activate some of that pigment and draw a controlled line somewhere. If you like that edge, great. If not, a little dampness will just soften that out to nothing. So this is the palette technique, and this is the draw and wet technique, and I'm going to show it to you in action right now. Here was a design that I drew some in and wetted prior to starting this fun little design. And you'll see the edges are just a little darker and the center is really bright. Right here, I put a second coat on very lightly, and you notice it even looks a little darker. And I'll even do this a little darker and a little wider. And I'll wet this one for you. Remember, I wet further back when I want the edge to smoke out, and then just when I hit it, I'm going to have all that bold color right off the bat. If you wanted it in this area too, just let this dry and then turn around, draw a little more on this side, and you can wet it out that way as well. Sometimes I like to just smoke my edges. So I'm going to draw and wet this one for you because that's what I did on the other side. And I'm going to even make it a little wider in the center because it'll pull up a little bit more. So then again, pre-wet that a little bit. Let the water come in contact with it. Just gives a little bit of a different look to it. Now, I love this. I wish I had a little more there. The best thing to do is let it dry and just come in and draw a little bit more. Or if it's still real wet, take a little bit of that palette color and drop it in for it to soften out on you. Okay. It's better to wait and then come back because if you introduce more water than is already there, it might give you a hard little dark mark. Here's another fun thing I did. Is this one is actually finished and I have a light layer on. I'm going to draw a little darker now right here. Now remember, I could just leave that alone. I don't have to wet it. When you wet it is when it starts to look like this soft paint almost added to it. And I'm going to try to pull it up closer so you can see how dark that is. I also could go in the middle of my design, say right here, and add a little more this way. Because if you've used a Pigment Micron pen, you don't ever have to worry about it reactivating or smearing the ink because it's a waterproof. See how that added just a little more depth in that area as well. Let me see if I can pull it up. There you go. Here's a fun little technique I want to share with you as well. If you want a fun, cool, diffused background. And how I did this was super simple. I just grabbed a fresh tile and let's pretend this is another piece of paper again. Made some swatches with my water-soluble graphite pencil. Now I'm going to wet the whole tile in advance. And I'm gonna wet my brush, get some of that pigment, and just drop it in spots. Okay, we don't have to fill the whole thing in. Then you're going to take some good old-fashioned plastic wrap and just let it first see what design it wants to make. See all those little raised up areas? That's the design it made. Down here I want a little more, so while it's wet, I'm just going to smush it. Just going to smush it. You leave the plastic wrap on until it dries. And then when you pull it off again, here's one version. Here's a version where I made it a little darker in some areas and lighter in others. Hope you try some of these fun techniques out on your tiles, but you can also, don't be afraid to even put it on some of the pages in your book. These lines I drew and then wet. These were still stationary. So you can get all kinds of great value exchanges going on, as well as a little bit of a painterly effect using that Sketch and Wash pencil.